Hello, and welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. Got a little different podcast today. I'm just going to mention go to buddyc.org, look at resources there. There's a lot of things there to help you if you're new to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk with Laurie M. She makes regular attendance in our Saturday podcast and our Saturday meeting that becomes a podcast, really. And I'd like to hear her story. So I asked her to come share her story today. Thank you, Laurie, for being here.
Thanks, buddy. This is fun. Fun to have it recorded.
Yes. Just share with us what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. And I'll ask you questions as we go if there's anything that comes to mind. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my sobriety date is 4/14/14. It's currently February 2024, so I'm coming up on 10 years. And there's not alcoholism in my family per se. We're very Irish and Scottish, so maybe we have a tendency towards that. I don't know. But there was no drinking in my household growing up. My father, I was an only child, raised by my grandparents and my single mom until I was about 7 or 8. My mom got married again and then had a couple more kids, 3 more kids. I have 3 half brothers. And my escape at that point in time was cigarettes. And I would steal my father's cigarettes and go outside and smoke from about the age of 8 or 9. And so that at the point, I have a long history of numbing. I have a very long history of numbing out my emotions and people pleasing. I turned into quite a workaholic, and I appreciate that to so many degrees because it overshadowed my drinking. In other words, the workaholism was more important at some point in time than the alcoholism. So when I was in my 20s, it's interesting to me, after we talked the other day, how delusional we can be just in our remembering. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I didn't start drinking until I was 30 something. I'm thinking about this honestly. And I'm like, okay, I drank in college and out of control a bit, but never a daily drinker until I tried to quit smoking once. And I was living on my own. I was managing a computer center in Denver. I grew up in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. And I can distinctly remember the moment when, in order to get rid of the withdrawal from nicotine, I found just some leftover booze in the cabinet above my stove and had a little swig and noticed what a great feeling that was and how that took away all the anxiety from the cigarette withdrawals. And that was the moment. And I wasn't 30, buddy. I was more like 23, I think. Yeah. So that's interesting. Anyway, so I was pretty much a daily, I start smoking again. Maybe not obviously, but I did start smoking cigarettes again. I managed to stay away from all sorts of other drugs and whatnot. I was always really worried about being out of control and getting pregnant, thanks to my father being and a stepsister I had that got pregnant at 15. So I think that also played a role in me behaving better around alcohol initially and not diving into it as much, as I was more afraid of losing control and getting pregnant. So anyway, I continued daily drinking and working and drinking for many years. I'm quite sure I got married in my early 20s, like 25, and we both drank. We eloped. He was a couple years younger than me, and I'm sure that ended because of my alcoholism, although I never knew that at the time. It wasn't obvious to me. Anyway, I was clueless. I guess we say high functioning alcoholic, because my gig was, once I got divorced, was work, drink to sleep, drink until I passed out, and get up at 5 a.m. and work again until 8 or 9 at night, drink to sleep, and then get up. And then weekends, occasionally, I was always drinking at home. I kind of credit that fact to why I never got a DUI or gotten any serious legal trouble or other trouble, because I nearly always drank at home. And I was very conscientious about avoiding the pregnancy and law. I avoided the law, issues with the law, and pregnancy. It kept me a little bit tight when it comes to my behavior with alcohol. I traveled all over the country for my job. And once again, wherever I landed, I had to have alcohol to sleep. And I was very successful in my corporate career. I've since retired. I'm in my late 50s, and I'm very fortunate, very blessed. I wouldn't change a thing, honestly, about what happened. I used to wish, wow, if I'd had some more consequences when I heard stories in the rooms. I used to think, oh, if I had more consequences sooner, I would have stopped drinking sooner. And blah, whatever. Oh my gosh, silly girl. It's all good. It's all perfect the way it's worked out. So my job took me to New York City ultimately, and a huge project there with the Board of Ed. And in 2009, I met my partner, Chris, at a bar on New Year's Eve, Demmelman's Bar at the Carlisle Hotel in New York City. And I was wasted when we met. He was a drinker also. So, yeah. Anyway, I wasn't looking for a romance. I was engaged in work, and we started dating. He lived upstate near Albany. I take the train up every weekend. I spent a lot of time catching up with alcohol in Penn Station waiting for trains, because I would take the train, and Friday afternoon, man, was the time to finally cut loose. And I knew every liquor store anywhere near Penn Station or on my way there. And so that continued. I ended up moving upstate after Chris and I had been dating about 2 years. I moved upstate in 2009. We met in 2007. I moved up here in 2009. And I continued my corporate gig, but I worked from home. And that made it tougher. I'd always worked from home, but anyway, I eventually was able to resign from that company and start my own business. I helped seniors downsize and move. And I've always been very helpful in my career for women, especially for those years. And then I ended up having too much time on my hands, quite frankly. Some of my sponsees are empty nesters who found that once they didn't have their children to chauffeur around and fawn over and whatever, worry about, cook for, clean up after, they had a lot of time on their hands. And that's what happened to me when I was able to resign from my corporate job and start my own business. What blessing, really. I just started drinking earlier in the day. And I was a blackout drinker, so I could not remember after a few what I did the night before.
Right.
So it was probably 2012, 2013. I started getting a lot of physical characteristics too. Shakes in the morning, drinking earlier in the day. And I just knew I needed to stop. I tried everything. I am very smart, and I'm very persistent. I'm very resourceful, and I chose to I had been to one AA meeting, and people love to hear this story. When I lived in Los Angeles for about 10 years, someone convinced me to go to an AA meeting. So this has been going on for a long time. So this was probably in the 90s. Someone convinced me to go to an AA meeting, and I ran away screaming, almost literally. There was so much God in that meeting that I just was out of there in no time flat and never went back. And that is not for me. That was a cult or whatever. I was raised very strict Catholic, and I called myself a recovering Catholic. And that's what turned me off, honestly. So fast forward again. That was just a little rewind, because that's a critical thing, that AA was not on the menu when I was looking for options. Mm. Now, Chris, my partner, had a couple DUIs locally. He grew up around here in New York, upstate, and he'd been to St. Peter's Addiction Recovery Center, outpatient, and he'd had some court-ordered stuff go on. So I had tried everything. I could go for months without a drink. No problem. I won't say no problem. That's silly. But I could go for a while with white knuckling it without a drink. And then I would decide I needed a reward for that. And before I even knew it, before I needed a reward, and then I was already at the liquor store buying a couple of shooters. And my drink of choice was tequila. And I would buy a couple shooters, and then within a week, I'd be back up to whatever the liter size is. I hid them everywhere. They were everywhere around the house. I still smoked cigarettes, so I would go outside and smoke and drink. Come inside and do whatever, and go outside and smoke and drink. Mm. I found bottles for months, years after. So one day I came home, and Chris, who's about 6'7" tall, was standing in the garage door. Garage was open, standing in the doorway. And when I came home from working with clients, and he had his hands on his hips, and I knew I was in trouble for something.
Right.
And he pointed to his Porsche. He had a Porsche Cayenne. He had a real nice other Porsche too, but thank God I didn't beat that up. There was dents in his Porsche, buddy. Mm. At some point when I was out smoking and drinking in the garage, I had decided to be angry at him, probably for some reason. And I physically beat up his Porsche. Oh. And I thought he was nuts. I'm looking at my hands. I'm saying, I don't have any bruises or anything. Wouldn't I have a bruise? Because I got enough bruises when I was drunk anyway. Wouldn't I have a bruise on my fist or my hand? And no, I don't. And I had no memory of it at all. So he said I had to do something. And he's the one who finally said, you need to go to Spark. Wasn't AA. My first appointment at Spark was that St. Peter's Addiction Recovery Center, was outpatient in Saratoga Springs. And I can distinctly remember this. It was the 14th of April. My first appointment at Spark was my first day sober.
Oh, so you stayed sober from the beginning?
Yep. Yep. No relapses and no AA meetings. Honestly, I didn't go to AA until a couple months later. My counselor at Spark told me, he was like 30 plus years sober, Peter. He handed me a little trifold piece of paper with a printout of all the AA meetings in our area. And we're very blessed here. We have 80 plus meetings a week here in my area. So he handed me that, and he knew me by then. So he said, just when you started your new business here, because I had never settled down in one place until I came here. He said, just like when you tried out every networking group to find a good business networking group for your business. And just like you were discerning and you can tell what would work for you, and if the people were sincere, if they were on your wavelength, when you were looking for those business networking groups, he says, treat it just like that. And he handed me this, and he said, I can get you sober, but I cannot keep you sober. So he says, you just keep going down this list until you find a meeting that feels good for you. Wow. Wow. I'm going to get choked up. That's what did it.
Yeah.
Truly. And I went to a lot of meetings, and a lot of them were not very nice. The people were just not very open or whatever. That was my experience. I figured out pretty quick I didn't like going at night. And I found a morning meeting that met every day, Monday through Friday, and then a weekend brunch bunch meeting that met on weekends. And so I went to a meeting, and I'm not exaggerating. I went to a meeting every single day for the first 18 months. Not 90 and 90, 18 months. The meetings are really what helped me bridge that gap and provided some insight into solutions. Nobody ever provided me with the 10 Commandments just weren't working for me. Or whatever the Catholic Church and all their rules provided wasn't working. I needed real skills. Yes.
I wanted to ask, was Spark different from AA? How did they approach recovery? Do they approach it differently in any way?
I have to remember, it was pretty foggy, to be honest with you. It was in an outpatient program, and it had to pee in a cup, so that probably helped. All voluntary. The classes I went to for 3 or 4 hours a day for, I don't remember, maybe 4 days a week, were just very factual, buddy. And I responded to that. Mm-hmm. I responded to the factual part. I had no idea the impact that alcohol had on my brain. I had no idea. I knew physically I was having issues. I had no clue how addictive it was, or how much I depended on it, or how it overrode my common sense or whatever. So it's a very practical, even though it's St. Peter's, it wasn't a religious program in any way. It was just addiction recovery. Yep.
Good.
And they didn't check up on me to see if I'd done or not, other than peeing in the cup. They never followed up and said, did you go to AA or whatever? I checked in with Peter a couple times after, but yeah. So that's how it was. How is it now? I am astounded and amazed at how fabulous. My life was not bad before, honestly. And now it's beyond my wildest dreams. That sounds so stereotypical, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, whatever. You're lying.
How soon did you get a sponsor? How did that happen for you?
That's a good question. I'm a very headstrong, rebellious, and not very woman, and I don't care for women for the most part. My experience with women in my life, and it's just my experience, and I had only one female boss in my life. It could be the way my father talked about women when I was a kid. Don't be like a woman. Whatever. Who knows? Bottom line is I had issues. I had trouble getting and keeping a sponsor. For that reason, I really didn't get through this. I did get through the steps, theoretically. I did. Either I wasn't ready, or I'm still good friends with my last sponsor, Carol. But it took me a while. Thank you for asking. And I'm not an emotional type, and at that point, the men that I respected in the rooms didn't have women as sponsees, or that would have been the best route for me, I think. I don't think there should be that barrier personally, but that's my opinion. The first woman I asked only had a year of sobriety and uber emotional. And it is what it is. It just didn't work for me. So that's been a journey. And it's a recent realization of mine as to why that was the way it was. I enjoy being a sponsor. Being a sponsor is absolutely one of the best gifts of the program. I would always speak up sponsorship, being a sponsor, forces you, just like being a teacher, you learn more than you ever dreamed of, whatever the subject is. The same thing applies for a sponsor. It keeps you fresh, keeps you green, keeps you in touch with your higher power, because that sponsee will push every button in your book.
Now, I learned the same thing. That was my experience too, Laurie, that it's one thing to work the steps yourself. It's another thing to be prepared to take someone else through the steps. So you worked the steps early in your sobriety. Is that what I hear? Or how long did that process take? And did you get more relief during that process, or how did that work for you?
I am a really slow learner in some regards. I think I'm a fast learner, or I thought I was. And what I'm realizing as I get older is I'm not such a fast learner. I went through all 12 steps with a wonderful woman who's since passed. And so I got through them because you're supposed to. And I had to do everything I was supposed to do. And now, and fast. And then I went through the steps again with my next sponsor. And then that stuck for about 6 years. And then during COVID, I got a different sponsor and did a 12-step workshop during COVID. What a blessing that was. A woman in Australia. And that's when I got it, finally. When I felt the relief you're talking about.
Right.
From doing the step 4 or 5. Wow, I really finally got it, that we get to be happy, joyous, and free if we choose. But that is the goal, to be happy, joyous, and free. And somehow that just never sunk in, that they mean me.
Yes. Yes.
You mean me? And if I actually keep working this until it works, then that's what I get. And it's just taken me a while. It's just taken me a while. That's all.
Okay. Now, when you first went to AA, you were chased out from God. God chased you out of the room, right?
Yep.
Rooms is what they say. And alcohol will run you back in. For a lot of folks. How has we don't talk about perceptions of God, never as a topic in a meeting. That's a bad topic, you sharing your perception, because everyone's perception gets bigger and broader. And it's like catching fish, comparing fish you catch. How did that progress for you from your one experience in California, what you thought of the higher power, God, whatever name you want to put on that, to now? How has that changed and evolved for you?
So I have very slowly released my resentment against the word God and the word LOV, because they're interchangeable for a lot of people. And I stopped crossing it out in the big book and putting something else. And I stopped crossing out he everywhere and putting she. And it stopped irritating me, like physically. I would get a physical response if someone would be too holier than thou or bring up Jesus Christ, their Savior, or something in a meeting. I would go ballistic on the inside. It's been very gradual, little by slowly. And I can remember being really damn pissed off about that freaking onion. I am done with this onion. Peeling the onion forever. And honestly, back to doing the steps, I remember distinctly 1 through 6, 1 through 8 maybe, and doing amends, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So 1 through 9, but 10, 11, and 12, somehow I skipped those babies. So I just don't remember them. I don't know if I was too overwhelmed or wiped out or whatever. I know I went over them with my sponsors.
Yeah.
But they just didn't sink in as something I should do, something I have to do. And that was when that lady from OA, honestly, not even AA, but she's a 12-step workshop leader in Australia over COVID, made me meditate, buddy. She made me. She said, and we're going to make it attainable. You're going to do 2 minutes a day, and you're going to be accountable to somebody. You decide who. After 30 days, you can reassess. and you can do another 2 minutes, or you can up whatever you want. So I went from 2 minutes to 2 minutes. I did 2 minutes a day for probably 3 months before I was ready to move to 11 minutes once a day. That's it. And over time, so 2024 it is. So 4 years it's taken for my awareness of my higher power, my inner truth, my inner voice to really land. My gosh, you're going to laugh. I found a pamphlet from the Oxford group called How to Talk to God, or How to Listen to God, not How to Talk to God, How to Listen to God.
Right.
And it was about meditation and writing. And it's a wonderful pamphlet. You can find it online. It's an old Oxford group pamphlet. And it's prayer and meditation, basically. But it gives you permission to, I still had to rename it. I still had to say, not how to listen to God, how to listen to the voice within. So I'm still, I don't know. I still had to go and rewrite that whole pamphlet and swap out the word God for voice within.
It's amazing things that offend us. Who cares what a word, me personally, but I'm the same. I have been the same way in the past. There's no way. And I strike in the third step prayer. We always, if I'm working with a sponsee, the part that talks about, I would only ask for myself if it was to be useful to others, that part, I said, I want to mark that line out. I said, you don't ask nothing for you. I said, because you're not capable of realizing what you really need. So your best just not to ask for anything, just listen. That's just freeing to realize that you already have everything. I don't need anything. Anything that I'm asking for me, this is just me. Now, this is my approach, but anything I'm asking for, it's coming from a place of fear, a fear foundation, really, because I'm saying I don't have what I need when I'm given everything I need in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is, and that's still evolving for you, right? Your perception of the higher power.
Yes. In fact, I just rewrote portions of that pamphlet in my journal this morning, and journaling has been a powerful tool for me. I would highly recommend to anyone. It has helped me to be objective. And actually, I've been listening to God all along when I'm journaling, and it's just not what I called it. But when I wrote that this morning, it's still, I don't feel worthy. When I rewrote sections this morning, the voice within knows everything about you. It's always been there for you. It can answer every question you have. It will never give you any assignment without supporting you. And that's so when I get in touch with that concept of there is a God within, and it's so huge and it's so powerful, and wow, I just feel puny, and I kind of recoil from that whole concept, and I'm letting it sink in. Thank God I've given myself permission to pause and just pause and let it sink in.
The next step for me after that, Laurie, was to realize, and this has just been recently, realize that my thoughts nor what I have accomplished or what I failed at, what I did horrible, what I did great, who I hurt, none of those things are the real me. And once I realized that, I was like, oh, all this stuff is like thoughts, all the fear, that's not the real me. I'm what's under that.
Yeah.
And so when I realized that, it was very freeing because I could no longer condemn myself, because I feel I'm a spirit being that I may have done some of those things, but that's not me. That was never me. And I'm not saying a cop out that we don't make amends and all those things. No, I don't want anyone to take it that way. But what I'm saying is, I'm that drop of love, that's that drop of God that's under all of that. And that's when it started changing from my higher power to the higher power. Because for a long time, the higher power, I'd hear that, especially in the South, the higher power, all of that. I'm like, oh, why don't they change that? What is the higher power? And then I realized, oh, it's talking about the oneness of all of us. There's just the one. And so I said, oh, now I understand. That's big in the 24-hour book in the meditation part. That was written by some ladies. It's different from the thought and the prayer. Different people wrote that. And they use the higher power a lot. And I'm like, why in the world don't they change that? That sounds so horrible. Now I realize why.
And you know what? I think one of the ladies, I was learning about the traditions, and she was a service sponsor. I don't know if a lot of people have that distinction between a sponsor and a step guide and a service sponsor. She was the one who first taught me the set aside prayer, buddy. And that was honestly my access to even being able to sit still long enough to meditate for 2 minutes, was to be able to say, and I've modified it over time. And I would encourage anyone who, if you look it up online, great, and then make it your own. You set aside whatever it is you got to set aside in the moment. I set aside everything I think I know, everything I believe to be true. No shit. My expectations, my judgments, my opinions. I set aside all of that for an open mind, open heart, and a new experience of the steps, life, my friend, my spouse, my mother, whatever.
The great thing is you only have to do it in this moment. It's not talking about setting all that aside forever. There's no way I could do it on that level, but sometimes I can right now. Keep doing it now, and those nows build up to time, just like we did with alcohol.
I was just going to say that. Yep. And that's what I had to do with cigarettes too. I quit smoking finally 18 months after I stopped drinking. And that was harder in a lot of ways. It had been with me a lot longer. That was really challenging. I have some powerful examples of my oneness taking care of me, or the oneness taking care of me. The fact I didn't kill myself, the fact that I didn't kill someone else, the fact that the obsession was lifted for me, and that's different for different people, but my partner was still drinking for 18 months after I got sober.
Wow.
And he was considerate about it for the most part, but it was still, if the sight of a bottle had sent me back, I would have been in trouble. So the fact that the obsession was lifted for me was necessary for me at that time. And I think one of the huge shifts that the daily meditation and prayer has provided is the ability to look at life from a different view. I get some beautiful moments while I'm meditating. And one of them was, you remember when trucks had bench seats?
Yes.
Once upon a time. And the image I kept getting in my mind was slide over. Like, I'm in the driver's seat, girl, just slide over. Let someone else do the driving for a while. And that's a hard thing to do for a control freak, people pleasing person. Rebellious and all that.
Leads me to my next question. How do you approach surrender and powerlessness? Because everyone looks at that a little different way. Oh, you have a tattoo, a surrender tattoo.
Yeah, and listen to your heart.
Ah, okay. So it was very difficult for you. You had to tattoo it to remember it. Is that what you're saying?
I did. I was so foggy for the first long time. I was foggy for quite a while. And that reminded me. And I chose to get it tattooed. I don't have any other tattoos. I have a couple on my wrist, and they're for me, right? Because I can remember that right after I got it, someone asked me about it. What does that mean? Because the general consensus in the business world is surrender is a bad thing. It means you've given up. But for me, it's the opposite. It's like that sliding over. That's it. That's surrender. And once again, that's a moment by moment conversation to have in my head. And I can't even do that if I don't pause. So the pause comes first and then the surrender. Oh, and then trying to be honest about it. And it's a work in progress. Thank God. Progress, not perfection.
Journey, not the destination.
So I've always been drawn to paradox. So I would say surrender is a massive paradox. And I like that title of your book too. Powerless but not helpless, because we tend to assume those two go together, and that's the complete opposite. The more I surrender and acknowledge that power within, the stronger I am.
When I finished writing that, I didn't have a title. And I just reminded the higher power, I said, I'm powerless over what to title this book. Wait until I'm sent something. And that week I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts, The Boiled Owl. By the way, that has Don M's a friend of mine. He's one of the co-hosts, and he now does the Grapevine podcast, which is an actual AA podcast. And just for clarification, Don M also did the art for me in the book. He had a guest on, and the guest said in her story, she said, I'm powerless, but I'm not helpless. I'm like, oh, here it is.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yes. I was just open, and it came along just like we learned life really is supposed to be. More about us just being open-minded and receptive rather than the controlling and the manipulative and the thinking we've got to make it happen, push. On that topic, what attracted you to the Tao? Because not everyone in recovery is attracted to studying the Tao Te Ching, but it really spoke to me, obviously. And why do you think that speaks to you?
As I mentioned, I started out life as a Catholic, and there's a huge wealth of Thomas Aquinas. I went to Thomas Aquinas College. I did a liberal arts program for the first 2 years of my college career. And so I studied Aristotle and Socrates. Those are all this core stuff that a liberal arts program provides. And I am so grateful. Once again, you can say what you want about Catholicism, but Catholic education is extraordinary. At least that's my experience. Mm-hmm. So I've always been curious. When I was later on, I went to Colorado State, and I spent a summer on the East Coast, and I came into the Benjamin Franklin Museum, and those random things, push a button and a quote pops up. And Ben Franklin said something about his own beliefs. And see, now I wish I could quote that, because it's a short little thing. I believe that there's some good power. He never was a part of any particular religion. And that just is so freeing in a lot of ways. It provides you don't have to judge. I know when I first started in Catholicism, they're all sinners and we are all saved. That whole idea that I've got the corner of the market on this religion. So anyway, I just started studying all sorts of things and being open to it. And I spent a lot of time and energy on Native American traditions. And that's still a very deep, wealthy, beautiful practices that I've gotten through that venue. And I think it was someone in those groups that was also studying the Tao. So I came across it somehow, because I didn't know about the other books you've talked about. But I bought a beautiful book, and I've always been a book person. All my travels always included a box of books. So that the Tao, and what strikes me, poetry has saved my life also. Poetry and journaling from when I was young. So it reminds me of poetry in a lot of ways. The way that it's done, it's very succinct. And that just speaks to me on some level. It's so funny you should ask me that, because I was just thinking this morning, I wonder, and I was journaling. This new Oxford group way of journaling is like a dialogue between you, and you listen to God, and you ask a question, you listen.
Mm-hmm.
And
don't they call that two-way prayer? I think, isn't that called two-way prayer? I believe
that.
Yes.
Yes. I think it's the same guy that wrote both books.
Yes.
There's books. Yes. Two-way prayer, I think, is where I found out about the Oxford group pamphlet.
There's actually a podcast that talks a lot about two-way prayer. And that's pretty much, he talks about that in everything. And his name is actually Bill W.
Is it?
Yes.
I'd have to grab the book downstairs, but yeah, it's a history of AA book, right? And he talks a lot about the history.
Now, I found the Benjamin Franklin quote.
Oh, our creed, my creed. Go ahead.
I believe in one God, creator of the universe, that he governs it by his providence, that he ought to be worshipped, that the most acceptable service we render to him is doing good to his other children. Is that the quote?
Yes, and he goes on. There's no judgment or something.
That's the only part that popped up for me.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's it. And I found that accidentally in this library in Villanova University, where I was working for a summer once upon a time. So it's interesting. So what God told me this morning, that sounds so weird to say that. What I wrote this morning was he, she, whatever, has been with me all along through poetry and journaling. And that's how I got hooked on meditation again, too. In fact, I'm going to Ireland this summer, and the meditation leader, Hugh Byrne, is one of the Insight Timer teachers. And he has a lot of poetry in his meditations. So I relate the Tao as poetry. And I'm all for ancient wisdom, man. If we don't have to learn it from scratch, why not?
And the Tao is all about surrender.
Yes.
I want to read what the Tao in the big book. Go to pages bottom of 84, 85, 86. We find a place of neutrality. We stop fighting anything and anyone. We can allow life to come to us rather than that whole push that we've got to make it happen. Let go and let God is a very Taoist sounding quote. Really, I like let go or get dragged, because
it's going to happen, right? Are you going to suffer, or how much suffering do you want?
I've got to let go. And most of us need a God to believe in to let go, especially at first. I just learned that everyone has their own God language, so to speak. Some use the word, some don't. Some believe particular things, some don't. It doesn't matter. It's none of my business. And they're all just speaking their own language.
That was a powerful lesson for me. And I'm so grateful that one of my ladies from AA, those first meetings I went to, is also in Al-Anon, because I realized early on when Chris was still drinking that I had no control, absolutely no control over that. And then again, when I was working with Jo from Australia, I was all pissed off about how someone else was behaving. And it seems so stupid and so simple. You have no control over what he thinks. You have no control over what he does. Really? Oh my gosh. That seems so silly now looking back, but wow, that's so freeing.
We spent all our time trying to control, or I did. That's really was try to control everything, thinking the control was where my peace and joy was, that I had to make it happen.
Yes. And you know what? Our society will back you up on that, because I was very successful for many decades with that kind of thing in mind.
Yes.
But our culture supports it.
I was still lacking, or I wouldn't have been drinking.
Yeah. Huh. So my focus now is just to keep paying attention, really, keep meditating more. I'm signed up for a meditation teacher training and I'm a sponsor, go to regular meetings. And yeah, that whole thing, keep your side of the street clean. I would love to teach meditation to AA people, buddy, because I can tell. Here, I just say that, keep your own side of the street clean, and then I'm going to go judge all these people. You can just tell that they're not happy, joyous, and free. I'll just leave it at that. And maybe access would be available through meditation.
For me, I started meditating at 8 years,
Mm.
and I'm at 15 now, 16, 08. So yeah, I'll have 16 in November. And when I was ready to start meditating, I thought about it. Maybe I need to look into meditation. And then that week, I had a sponsee I met with a day or two later. He said, I think I want to start. We hadn't even talked about it. I think I want to start meditating. I found a great podcast. I said, oh, really? So I started listening to a podcast about meditation. And then I started meditating 20 minutes a day in the morning when I got up. And that was my practice for a long time, starting out at that, I guess because I was ready. I don't know.
That's it, man. Yeah.
So I take the approach that it's not the teacher that draws the student, it's the student that draws the teacher. So when the student's ready, the teacher appears.
Yes.
We're ready, and then what we need appears for us. That's the essence of the whole program, really. If we step out of the way, we can allow that to happen in everything, not only our alcoholism and our spirituality. Everything can be taken from an approach of powerlessness.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as you force it or you want to force it, it's not going to work out.
Yeah. So if my head's going crazy, then I can, instead of sitting there thinking about me, I can go help someone else and get the focus off of me. And that really helps for me to lessen that selfishness, because the more I have the focus on me, the worse it is.
So here's something funny, and I love the paradox of this. I was such a fixer and such a people pleaser that I did a lot of great service work for the group and for my district here. It's the registrar and the librarian and literature. And it dawned on me, it was causing me so much turmoil because people were not doing what I wanted them to do, and they weren't behaving the way they should be behaving. And didn't they know about the traditions? And what's the matter with all these people? That I had to step away. And it took me about a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years of really not doing service aside from being a sponsor. And I wasn't even a sponsor for a part of that. I needed that to see my motivation was fucked up. I really needed to see that.
But you weren't ready for it until you were ready.
No, that's right. I had to beat my head against the wall for quite a while and become very agitated and uncomfortable before I had the sense to just say, okay, because of course too, when you volunteer, and I had retired, buddy, and as soon as you retire, boy, everybody would love for you to volunteer. And if you actually are very efficient and productive and especially technical, they will take every minute you'll give them and then some. Mm-hmm. So I had really gotten sucked into a lot of different volunteering positions, not just AA, but other organizations. And I needed that time for myself. So I appreciate what you're saying about taking time out to help others. For me, I really got a lot out of Melody Beattie's books. And that was just my path. I needed that break from that. And now I'm much more selective and I'm much more conscious about my motivation in the moment. To no rescuing, no fixing. It's genuine. It feels much more authentic now. But I needed that break.
See, that's the difference between real service and that service coming from self.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And I had a sponsor ask it, okay, how do I no, I'm really doing service. I said, are you aggravated if other?
Are you attached to the outcome?
Yeah, he bought a guy a big book and then got aggravated because he never saw the guy again.
Yeah.
I was like, see, that was out of the wrong motivation. But because of your response, you attached expectations to it.
That's it. My first couple sponsees were tricky. And I ended up doing things for them that I should never have done, but I didn't know. And I didn't set any boundaries. So also taking care of yourself is part of that. Respecting your own time and sticking up for yourself. Oh my gosh, I could do that in a business world in a heartbeat. Not a problem. On a personal level, all these things I had to learn. Yeah, personal relationships. If it was a business relationship, buddy, I had no problem telling you where to go. And you listen generally.
I've got a bit thicker skin. I've got one sponsee. Recently, I said, I want you to check in with me every day. He was having some issues. He stopped checking in. So when it's time to meet, where are you at? I said, you haven't been checking in, so I didn't think you had time to meet this week. Why don't you check in every day this week and I'll be here for you next week? That kind of thing. Sometimes you've just got to do it. If they're crossing the line, not setting their boundaries. And if they want another sponsor, they're welcome to it. There's no animosity there, but you ask my experience and me to help. When someone having an issue, I'm like, let's talk every day. Let's take care of this. I think that's what we need to do. That's what I'm going to suggest. And if they're just not listening to us or not gleaning from our experience, really that's all we can do, share our experience, then I think a lot of times we're better to cut the cord.
That was another great outcome of that 12-step workshop I went to. And Herb K, you can find it online. Herb K is the one who created the actual workshop that Joe in Australia was teaching. But he has a monthly sponsor Zoom meeting that you can attend and ask questions. And he's very clear and concise. And Joe helped me and I'm a documenter. That's just what I've always done in my life. I write quick reference guides for whatever you got to do. I can zero in on those 6 steps. So I wrote a sponsorship guide. Here's the questions you need to ask a potential sponsee. Here's the things you need to be prepared to provide. And here's some boundaries. And one of them is if they consistently miss a meeting, it's that sort of thing. And Herb would never say, you never fire a sponsee, they fire themselves.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And we don't just know these things, obviously. We need to have some guidance. And personally, I didn't get all that much guidance on that initially, or I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
No blame.
We have, just like everything else, we have to approach differently in recovery than what we approached prior to recovery. I cannot get anyone sober. I can't.
Oh, you can't keep them sober.
Can't keep them sober. I can't make them drink. All I can do is share my experience and then let it go. And if they glean from my experience, great. If they don't, that's not on me.
That's right.
I don't have any responsibility for their sobriety if I'm sharing my experience as I feel appropriate. That's a whole nother attitude.
I totally agree. And one of the most beneficial things I learned to say to myself, like a little mantra, is I trust your higher power. And you can trust mine. You don't need to take care of me, and I'm not going to take care of you. I trust your higher power to do that. That's huge. That's powerless, right? That's pretty surrendering.
Oh, very much. Very much.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but absolutely. And it gets me off the hook, but then I don't need to be attached. It allows me it's that paradox again. I'm responsible and I'm not responsible. I'm responsible to be a good example.
Yes.
And that's it.
That's exactly it. That's the only way I've survived. I've had sponsees that have gone back out. I've had sponsees that haven't. I don't keep a scorecard. I really couldn't tell you exactly how many sponsees I have. I could if I sat and thought about it. But we all have different ways we work with sponsees. Most of mine, we meet once a week and are reading some book, just reading that together. With one I'm reading right now, Not God, Ernest Kurtz. Another one I'm reading, Joko Beck, Everyday Zen. So there's different. Another one I'm reading, The Winsa with. So there's so many. I just asked them what speaks to them spiritually. And once a week for about an hour, we get together and read it and talk. And that seems to work for most guys. And these are guys that's been sober several years, most of them. They're not new. I'm not a newcomer.
Yeah, that's a tough road, man. Yeah. More power to those sponsors who can handle that. I definitely suggest a 30-day, everyday, 10-minute phone call. That has worked for me to ensure that they're serious and they're going to show up. And then that's it, just to check in. And then after the 30 days, I start on the steps. But something that was really cool that Herb did that I appreciated, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but we started with 10, 11, and 12. Most of the people who took that 12-step workshop had already been sober for some time. And that review of 10, 11, and 12 was the first time I had been through it like that. And that's when I started that 2-minute daily meditation. And then it gave me tools to get through 1 through 9 in a much more authentic way, much more supported way. Mm-hmm. And I had to be willing to ask for help. And that was a long time ago, but that's a constant reminder. I'm getting better at that. But yeah, so I have a certain program I follow. I do start with 10, 11, and 12. I do 30 days, and then I do 10, 11, and 12. It's once a week. And then I go through the steps 1 through 12. And I really enjoy Joe and Charlie's books, the steps we took and the guidance we gave or something like that. There's one for sponsors and there's one for sponsees. You can get it on Amazon.
Thank you, Laurie. Anything else to add? I've enjoyed hearing your story today. Thank you.
I appreciate you asking me. I think it's very sweet. And what a great safe space to share, buddy. I thank you for that. And all the great influence that you've had and that you continue to have with your daily emails. I love them. Oh, and if I don't tell you more, I'm sorry. I'll tell you more often. But they're very helpful to me. And I share them with everyone I know in AA. So I don't know how many more people, but it's nice to have everything in one spot. That way you can scan it and you can see what jumps at you. And you can get a good, solid, healthy kind of start on the day or perspective shift. For me this morning, so this is it, and I'll sign off. The thing that I've noticed the most, that I'm the most grateful for of all of this and all these years, is a shift in my own perspective on everything out there. And that I am responsible for that perspective. And to keep reminding myself, it's little by slowly. I don't have to be in a hurry about it. If I just sit back, relax, like the big book says, and stop fighting everything, that perspective is just such a gift, that everything, no matter what it is, no matter what happens, is a gift if you look at it that way.
Is new and they don't know about the devotions, you can go to buddyc.org and sign up for that. They're free, and I don't share any emails with anyone. They don't go to any marketing or anything. They stay for what they're for.
Confidential.
Yes.
Anonymous.
I don't do that. I had a chance actually with Transitions Daily. If you don't know what Transitions Daily is, it's a daily email with all the daily readers that we use in AA. It's transitionsdaily.org. When I was working with that, I got marketing offers to market, because we had at the time 15,000 that received this. Now
Tell
we're
the story about that. Do you mind? I want to hear that do you mind telling that story about how you started doing that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. I can share that. There was a guy in my home group. He was one of those staunchy old AA. He was ex-military, went by the rules.
The
And
grumpy old timer is the way I
yes,
think.
nobody liked him. Nobody liked him. And so I just joined in with the not, because that's what everybody did. And he got sick in a neighboring town about 30 or so miles away. And I felt like I should go visit him in the hospital. He had heart problems. He was in his mid 70s. And I went and visited him. And from that, I was on the list, but I didn't realize he was the one that started it. And for at least 10 years, he had been pushing a button every night to send it, every night for 10 years. I couldn't believe it. And he asked me if I would help him with that and take that on when he's gone. And so I did, and started making some changes and just got it a lot. And then was able to bring in some other people to help take over a lot of the responsibilities. But one of the great, and that's evolved into me getting to all the podcast. Everything that I've done came from that one visit, visiting a guy I didn't even like in the hospital. So we never know when we do that kind of thing what it's going to lead to. We never know. We never know. So
it's brilliant. Yes, it's brilliant.
We could never figure that. If we could figure this out for ourselves, there's no way. Absolutely.
There's no way.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome,
much, Laurie. Look forward to seeing you in a meeting soon, and thank you so much for sharing your story. Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use, and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.